Hello, and welcome back to Nicole's Needlecrafts. I am Nicole, and today is the 3rd of January. For a lot of crafters, that means it's temperature blanket time. For me, that also means it's temperature blanket time, or at least it's temperature blanket attempt time, because I've never successfully finished a temperature blanket. I did in 2022 start a temperature blanket, and I got all the way until April, which I feel like is a very relatable thing for a lot of us, and then I just kind of fell off of the temperature blanket train. I just could not care less anymore. And I think I've identified a few reasons why. In approaching my 2024 temperature blanket, I decided I need to make this as painless as possible for myself. I need to plan less, but the planning I do needs to be simple and effective planning. I am very much one of those one of those people who loves to overplan everything, and I often fall into the trap of I plan, and I don't do, so I am changing that this year. That being said, the key for my 2024 temperature blanket and keeping myself on track with it is to make it as simple as possible. I, in the past, have tried to do metered squares. Each square took me about 20 minutes, and I had to pay at least a little bit of attention to the decreasing to create metered squares. If you don't know what metered squares are, I'll show a picture here of the start of the blanket, and those little squares, those little diamonds, those are metered squares, and that's what I was creating for my temperature blanket. 20 minutes and needing to pay attention was clearly too much for me, and now I've just got a sad third of a year temperature blanket sitting under my bed. So this year is going to be different. There were a few things I needed to ensure that I kind of checked off my list this year with doing a temperature blanket. The first is I need to use yarn that I already have. As you can see, I have a lot of yarn. This is only a small bit of my overall collection. One day I'll show you guys the rest. I have a ton of yarn, and I wanted to make sure that I used some of it for this blanket. I don't want to go out and purchase new yarn. As much fun as that is, I've fallen into that trap before where I purchase yarn for a temperature blanket or a mood blanket or this or that, and then I abandon the project and I've spent $100 on yarn and I no longer know what I'm going to use it for. So I went into my stash and I found yarn to use. Some of that yarn is a number 4 worsted weight and some of it is a number 5 bulky, and I have decided to kind of mix them in this blanket. What that means is I need to basically just be aware of which colors are bulky and which colors are worsted weight. And what I've decided to do is basically for the worsted weight colors, I'm just going to double up the yarn and make it thicker. And for the bulky weight, I'm just going to use it as a single ply. That's just in an attempt to make an overall bulkier blanket and to keep the gauge at least somewhat consistent across different yarn types. That's the tricky thing about using yarn from your stash. Unless you have a stash of all one weight of yarn, you're likely to come across kind of a bit of like a mosaic of different yarn weights, and then you kind of have to figure out, how am I going to make sure that, the gauge in the blanket doesn't go like this throughout the creation of the blanket. So that's what I've come to. I'm going to double up my worsted weight yarns, and I'm going to use a single ply of my bulky weight yarns. That being said, I've got a little card here that I've created, a little sample card, and I'll go through that with you guys. I live in Canada, so I'm going to be doing things in degrees Celsius. I very much live in a 4-season part of Canada, as if most parts of Canada aren't 4-season, but we experience everything here from like negative 40 degrees Celsius up to like positive 30 degrees Celsius. Now, negative 40 is very unlikely to happen this year or most years, but it is possible. So basically I have taken my temperature ranges and I've broken it down within a span from negative 25 degrees Celsius or colder all the way up to 26 degrees Celsius or warmer. Each of my, I guess you could call them bins if you're into graphing, or each of my ranges is a 5-degree range. So you'll see that here. So there's my little card. So you can see it goes from negative 25 or colder, that's one range on its own, and then it goes up incrementally. Basically knew that I wanted to create a rainbow blanket, but I am not a brights kind of person for the most part. I definitely have some bright yarns in my collection, but I am much more into kind of the more relaxed, toned down, desaturated colors. Coldest will be this black. We get into a little bit of like a white, cream color, a gray, and then the blue. We get into a purple here. So it doesn't perfectly follow a rainbow, but we go like that, and then all the way into the warmer colors here. But those are the colors I'm going to be using. As I had said before, this being a simple design is very important to me. If it's something that I have to think too much about, or if it's something that's at all difficult for me to execute, I know that I won't do it. I know that there will come a day where I'm like, nope, not interested, too much effort. I work full time, I'm in school full time. It's all gonna be too much. So I need to make this as easy as possible for myself. So the design that I kind of fell into with this is a very, very simple one. Basically, I'll put a little diagram up here, but basically the year is going to be divided into 4 quarters, and they're going to end up being 4 little strips of 3 months of data. But the general idea is that it's going to be 4 different panels, each of 3 months, and I'm primarily going to be using stockinette stitch to create these panels. I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a little 3-stitch border of garter stitch on either side, just so that the pieces don't curl too much, because stockinette stitch does have a tendency to curl quite a bit on the edges. And then once I piece the pieces together, any curl that is left will be hopefully gone. So that's the plan. Stockinette stitch and garter stitch, very, very easy. Don't have to think about it too much. I did some calculations of what I think my gauge is going to be. Basically what I decided is that each day is going to be represented by 3 rows. So day 1, 3 rows. Day 2, we're on row 6. Day 3, we're on row 9. And what that allows me to do is to create panels that are hopefully going to be in and around 6 feet long. And then I've decided to do the panels 50 stitches wide, which will hopefully, by the end of everything, create a blanket that is about 6 feet long and 5 to 5.5 feet wide. That's my goal. It might be a little different. I might add a border at the end. I don't really know. A year is a long time to change my mind on how I'm going to put this blanket together. But I will, of course, bring you along for the ride. So that being said, I have not decided on any specific like needle size or anything that I'm going to use for this. I'm literally just going to go look up the first 3 days of January. Today's January 3rd, so I'm going to go and look up the first 3 days of January, high temperature at noon, and I'm going to record them, and I'm going to create the first 9 rows of my blanket. What size of needle I'm going to use, probably something that I've got lots of duplicates of, to be honest. I would say the average weight of yarn I'll be working in is like an Aran, somewhere between a worsted weight and a bulky weight. It'll end up being maybe like a US 8 or something like that. Haven't fully decided. I'm approaching this in a really chill way because that is the only way that I know I will actually continue to work on this project. So with that being said, I'm going to go and start that, and I'll give you a little update as to what that looks like right about now. Okay, and here's that update with some help from some chocolate to keep it from curling, because despite my attempt with a garter stitch border, it is still curling a little bit. I think it'll stop doing that once it's a big enough piece and it's knit to the other panels. So this is the start of one vertical panel, and then there'll be 1, 2, 3, 4 kind of thing. This is what it looks like. We're only on January the 8th in here, so yeah, not a huge fan of the colors together, to be honest, but I'm really glad I'm using something from my stash, and I think once all the other colors and everything are put in, it'll look a lot more like the vision. It'll look a lot more cohesive and better as a rainbow. Otherwise, I probably wouldn't choose to put just these colors together on their own. But yes, that's where we're at. I think that's going to be it for this video. Just a quick little idea of what I'm doing for my temperature blanket this year, and let me know in the comments below what kind of stuff you guys are doing for your 2024 temperature blankets. Let me know. I want to hear from you. Thanks so much for watching, and I hope to see you next time. Bye.